I went out into Wall Street at a very young age, my early 20s, and I had very rapid success. And by the time I was 26, I was managing my own portfolio, which blossomed into an over $1 billion account. I was ranked one of the top 30 traders under 30 years old in the world. I was doing really well. But like you said, I was 330 pounds. I was in a mental and physical health crisis that was about to cost me my life.
Welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. I'm your host, Leigh Brandon. This work started for me several decades ago when I started to see the impact I could make on people, helping them to identify the root cause of their health problems that no doctor could figure out, including serious back, knee, shoulder and neck injuries, acne and eczema issues, severe gut health problems, even helping couples get pregnant after several IVF treatments had failed. And it really moves me to be able to help people in this way. And that is why I do what I do and why we have this show. In this week's episode, I spoke with Jason Pickard, a man whose story I'd heard many times before from Paul Chek, for his great transformation from being a very successful, yet very overweight, unhappy and unhealthy trader on Wall Street, to the man he is today, a very fit, healthy and successful coach who helps teach people the lessons that he learned along the way on his amazing hero's journey to become the man he is today. When Jason reached out to me to come on the podcast, I had no hesitation and couldn't wait to share his amazing story and the deep wisdom he's gained by studying with some of the world's greatest teachers that he now wishes to share with the world. Jason Pickard, welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show. And I just have to say, I'm a real fan of what you've achieved over the years. I've heard quite a lot about you from Paul Chek and the journey that you've been through. And I'm really happy that we're going to be, sharing that story with my audience today.
Thank you so much. I feel the same way about you. We never really met in this context, but I've been a big fan of your work on acne, like we were talking about a little bit earlier. It really moved me to see such an amazing body of work out there that really got to the root causes of these problems that so many of us suffer from. So it's really my pleasure to be here with you, and I look forward to going deep together.
Awesome. So to kick things off, Jason, could you share with the audience the story of how you went from being a hedge fund manager in a mental and physical crisis, weighing 330 pounds, to where we are today? You're in super shape mentally and physically, and now teaching others to optimize their wealth and their health.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been quite a journey. I grew up with sort of mainstream beliefs around education and what success really meant. I pushed myself through university, really striving to be a financial wizard. I went out into Wall Street at a very young age, my early 20s, and I had very rapid success. And by the time I was 26, I was managing my own portfolio, which blossomed into an over $1 billion account. I was ranked one of the top 30 traders under 30 years old in the world. I was doing really well. But like you said, I was 330 pounds. I was in a mental and physical health crisis that was about to cost me my life. So I had this really big paradox of, kind of being rich in some ways, but feeling broke and poor in others. And I had to really ask myself, what's all this for? What's the point of all this? What's the point of pushing myself each day to succeed and make more money if I don't have anyone to share it with, if I don't know if I'm going to be alive in 10 years, let alone 5 years, because of how severe my health crisis was? I mean, I was obese and I was having a lot of challenges. So around that time, I started really kind of getting into exercise, and I met a trainer named Chabo Lucas, who was a Czech level 1 trainer. And I got exposed to how to eat, move, and be healthy. And I started applying the principles, very kind of basic at that point. But it was really about a 2-year stint that I had of exercising my butt off. I mean, I'm talking about morning, night, just sweat, watching the pounds go off. And it was quite an interesting process of watching yourself transform in front of your own eyes. I remember waking up each day and looking at the mirror and not even recognizing myself, just staring there and saying like, who is this guy? Because my physical body was actually changing faster than my mind could accept this new version of myself. And I did that for about 2 years, and I lost 170 pounds. But
Wow.
interestingly, I didn't feel that much different on the inside. At that point, I was physically in shape, but mentally and emotionally, I still kind of felt flat and depressed and not really, nothing had really shifted. And that's when I first met Paul Chek in 2009 and have been a private student of his ever since, really just devouring his work as much as possible, just like you have. And that's when I really realized that this whole idea about health was more of an inner journey than an outer journey. And I started learning about meditation and working in exercises and Tai Chi and psychology and spirituality and many other things that I learned. I really learned how to start living. I was very flat and sort of burnt out. And he really helped me find that life that I was missing. And then I really kind of incorporated that into my trading career. For the next 9 or 10 years, I became even more successful in that field by incorporating, what I would call the 4 doctors of trading, putting Dr. Diet, Dr. Movement, Dr. Quiet, and Dr. Happiness into my work and really finding a way to maximize my vitality and my energy and to be like a high performing athlete in Wall Street at the same time having a balanced lifestyle. This really all kind of came to a close for me in 2009 when I realized that I just didn't really love what I was doing anymore. I wanted to do more. I wanted to teach. I wanted to learn. I wanted to share my wisdom with the world. And I left Wall Street in 2009, and 2019, and really spent the last 4 years on a quest to find out what really is my deeper purpose. I moved away from this Wall Street. I said, I don't want to be this guy anymore. I don't want to be this trader type. I've had enough of that. I moved deeply into process work psychology to become a process worker, studied a lot more shamanism and biogeometry, and took more certifications in the Czech system and many other things, including open focus meditation and community drumming, and really just like dove into all of these more holistic or esoteric practices, only to realize on that journey that my real purpose in this world is to integrate the two. It's to go back to the trading community, to the investment community, to teach people how to be successful and how to make wealth, but at the same time, how to support their well-being in the process. And that's when I discovered that that's what actually true abundance means, is having wealth and well-being. And that's really where I am today with having produced this course that's coming out this spring called the Abundance Archetype.
So just to take you back a little bit, what do you think it was that got you to the point where you were 330 pounds?
It's a really interesting thing. And, the human body and the human psyche, as you know, is very complex. So it's really hard to pinpoint any one thing, but there are many streams. One of the things that I found interesting lately is this concept of having a vanishing twin. I don't know if you've ever heard of this vanishing twin.
No.
Interestingly, I read a book called My Twin Vanished, and it really resonated with me. And what they said was, I think about 1 in 8 people have a twin in the womb that kind of gets reabsorbed and vanishes, essentially dies, right? And most people don't really think too much about that. I mean, when we were growing up, there probably weren't as many of the sonograms and as much imagery. Now there's probably a lot more, depending on who your doctor is and what your dream is for, how many 3D images you want of your child. But there's a lot of people who go in and, in the 2nd or 3rd or the 4th month of their pregnancy, and they say, oh, you're having 2. And then you come back in a month or so, oh, there's only 1. But what happens is, this is in Paul's concept of the imago Dei, sort of this original image or this original archetype of how life is for us. If we have that going on, imagine what kind of belief systems we can set up. That love in life means if I don't eat enough, I may die. Love in life may mean don't get too close to people because they may leave you. And this is just one of the things, coupled with ancestral belief systems, various experiences that happened to me in my childhood that I think were really influential. One in particular, in process work psychology that I study, we work with one's earliest childhood dreams or earliest childhood memories and how they influence one's path in life. And I had an experience when I was 7 years old. I came home with my first report card. I gave it to my mom, expecting that I was going to get rewarded. And she said, "Oh, this isn't quite up to par." And it really, really hit a very deep chord in me. And I felt like at that point, I set up this belief system that I had to really, in order to feel love and appreciation, it had to be all about accomplishment. But it was this sort of insatiable quest because this accomplishment and this appreciation and this achievement was coming from externally. So all of these things, I think, really fueled that, on top of growing up in the 80s and 90s in the United States when the standard American diet was, microwave dinners and cereals and diet Snapples and, all of the crap that we now, well, many of us still don't know that, but hopefully the people listening to this podcast know that that's not the correct way to eat. Completely processed, non-organic foods. And despite whatever I did, despite all of the sports I played and despite all of the exercise I did, I couldn't really kick the weight. So it was really, I think, a combination of many, many, many different streams and something I think even larger karmically for me, in that I think getting that experience of really knowing what does it feel like to be 330 pounds, not having clothes that fit, sweating before you even leave the house, just feeling uncomfortable, feeling that depressed about the way you look, really has helped me be a better coach because I can really empathize and feel what it feels like to be in someone's body who's carrying extra weight.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've said a few times on previous episodes that I almost called this podcast the Hero's Journey podcast. And one of the things I've always wanted to do is to get people on and talk to, share their experience of the hero's journey with the audience. And you're probably the best example, that anyone could ever listen to in terms of the hero's journey.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And it's interesting because I feel like this hero's journey is sort of a perpetual hero's journey. There was a hero's journey associated with losing the weight and becoming healthy. But I actually felt like I went on another one when I left the known world of Wall Street and went into the unknown world, had a lot of challenges over this last 4 years, and now have integrated it. And I'm bringing home the elixir back to the Wall Street community of here's what I learned on my journey. So I feel like it's a never ending, spiral of heroes' journeys that we're on, because the whole reason for being here is growth and development, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, definitely. And was there a moment that made you kind of realize, when you were 330 pounds, was there like a moment, almost like a light bulb moment where you kind of said to yourself, this needs to change?
Yeah. As Paul Chek might say, you can either be running towards a dream or running away from a nightmare. I may be paraphrasing how he would say it, but for me, really, I'd love to say, I was running towards this dream, but I was running away from a nightmare. I wound up in the hospital. I had this leg infection. I had this purple thing creeping up my leg, and I was there in the hospital by myself. My family didn't live in New York City where I was living. I just felt alone, and I just like, this has got to stop. I'm just scared. And at that moment, I just kind of threw down the gauntlet and started on that exercise path and continued growing through all the different stages, as I mentioned a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I asked that question because I often find that is the case for most people. They kind of hit rock bottom and they either carry on along rock bottom or they say, this has got to stop and I've got to do something else because this isn't working.
It was a real tipping point. I mean, I was on the verge of sort of a medical life, pills and surgeries and doctors, or a tip the other way, exercise, diet, sleep, introspection, happiness. And so I'm glad I tipped in that way because it's been a lot more enjoyable than I imagined the other one was. And I probably wouldn't be here today if I didn't choose that path.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. So what you've done is you've gone from being a profit center for the pharmaceutical industry to what we would call a rock star client.
Yeah. Maybe from profit to prophetic or something like that.
So what I'd like to talk about is, the course that you've put together.
Yes.
So it's an 8-step process, and you call it the 8 keys to greater wealth and well-being. And that's pretty much based on what you've learned in your own journey. Can you tell us what each of the 8 steps are? And then perhaps we'll dive into each one of the steps in turn in a bit more detail.
Yeah, of course. So the course is pretty deep. The 8 keys to greater wealth and well-being are this free offering that I put on my website, jasonpickard.org, or you could get it on my Instagram, jasonpickardofficial. And that's just my free offering to the world. And that is, those are things that I've taken from the 8 steps to mastery in my course, things that people can do today to create more wealth and well-being in their life that shouldn't take any more of their time, shouldn't take any more of their money, and should really give them more energy and resources to live a better life. So that's just my free gift to you all, and I hope you download it and enjoy it. I put a lot of time into it. But the course essentially starts with developing your own process. I really stress the importance of the individuation process and realizing what works for you. If you take an analogy that Paul uses a lot, there's hundreds of thousands of diet books out there, but there's more obese people than ever. Mm-hmm. And the problem is because what worked for somebody else probably isn't going to work for you, right? If you do the purple diet or the Chinese diet or the Mediterranean diet, well, that may work if you live in Greece, but it's not going to work for you if you live in Alaska, for example, right? So if you take that analogy and you apply that to everything, your diet, your movement practices, your sleep needs, your play needs, your competitive edge in business, all of these different things, we stress at the beginning the importance of finding your way, finding your process or your highway. Frank Sinatra says, I did it my way. And that's really the key is this is all about finding your way to wealth and well-being. So I take you at the beginning through how to define a process for yourself, how to find your competitive edge in business, what makes you different and unique. If you think about in business, the reality is that there's only one of us ever. And so our best ability to be successful is to bring out our unique gifts, skills, and talents to the best of our ability. If we're trying to be like somebody else, they've already done that. And so to the extent that we can really individuate and differentiate ourselves, that's the highest level of success that I think we can achieve. So we look at that in business, but then also in life. What's the diet that we need? What's the exercise we need? How do we learn best, et cetera? Then we look at how do we use our units? So in trading and in investing, and what was interesting about this is the reason I'm talking about investing is I realized that the keys to being a good investor or the keys to being a good trader, if you actually made yourself the investment, the same principles applied. So in this process, I'm showing you how to look at your investments in this way, or how to look at your business in this way, then how you can use those same principles to look at your life. So when we look at units, we realize that once we define our competitive edge in investing, we want to have larger bets when we have a larger edge and smaller bets when we have a smaller edge. If you were counting cards at a casino and you were playing blackjack, let's say, you'd put a larger bet down when you thought there was a higher chance of you getting a blackjack than if you thought you were going to get, a low card, for example. Well, the same thing comes in investing. And then in our life, how are we using our units of energy, time, money, and resources in accordance with what's giving us the best results? So we're looking at what are the risk rewards of our investments? What are the risk rewards of the decisions that we're making and activities in our life? How do we use risk management? How do we use questioning to look at these things? How do we set up systems of evaluation? How do we then stalk ourselves using our body's wisdom and various other techniques? how do we learn from our lessons and learn from our losses, for that matter, and turn our losses into lessons? And then how do we detach from the process? So that's really the beginning of the course, is setting up this process for you. Mm-hmm. And then comes the 8 steps to mastery.
Right.
Yeah, which I'm happy to continue or talk about it whenever.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously I've looked through the overview of the program, which looks amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
So key number 1.
Yes.
Sounds very simple.
Yeah.
It's be you. Can you tell us about what that means?
Yeah, so we hit it a little bit already.
Yeah.
But it's this idea of that, really find out what makes you tick, what makes you great, what are your unique skills and characteristics. You must recognize that nobody in the history of this planet ever will have your fingerprints or your unique makeup. You've come into this planet with a unique signature. And to the extent that you're trying to be somebody else, you're a part of somebody else's process. So I take you through all of these different exercises. For example, what did you love to do when you were 7 years old? And cultivating that. I have an exercise where we look at it from the perspective of your deathbed. If you had 1 week to live, how would you be spending your time? And we kind of circle it around to look at what are the key processes that are behind this. You're a great example for this. Right? You made a book and a course, I believe, about acne. And you're really just pulling from your own life experiences of just being authentically you. And you turn it into this like incredible offering to the world. I mean, that's a perfect example of taking all of the things that have happened in your life, what your unique skills are, your unique experiences, and then bringing them forward. And not trying to say, oh, I'm going to do something else. No, I'm going to do what I know. I'm going to know where my wisdom is and share that with the world. So that's essentially the first step. And we take a lot of different ways at trying to hone in on that.
That sounds great. One thing I'd like to get your view on, because this is a question or a circumstance or a situation that I experience a lot as a practitioner. I generally start all of my coaching with clients trying to get them to, get really clear on what their dream is, right? Sure. What their goal is. And in the majority of cases, especially younger clients, they've generally don't really know what they want to do with life.
Right.
Because almost everyone that comes to me, they're in a job that they don't like. They're in a job because it pays the bills, keeps a roof over their head, puts food on the table. What would be your angle on that if you were working with someone who was in that situation where they're like, I just don't know what my life's dream is?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really interesting question. One of the things that Paul might ask them is, what's your nightmare? Right? What don't you want? And then, once okay, I don't want to, for me, I don't want to be sick or dying or, without a relationship or whatever, then at least you have some sort of goal in terms of the opposite of that. But one of the ways that I've found through process work psychology that I put in my course is looking at what did you love to do when you were 7 years old? So, I'll give my example. So for me, when I was 7, I loved drumming and magic. Now, when I get into trading, you might say, well, what does drumming and magic have to do with trading? But, the thing that I loved about drumming was the rhythm and the beat and keeping the time. And with the magic, it was all about creating this aha moment, this like, some pulling a rabbit out of a hat and just kind of defy odds. Well, the same thing is what I really enjoyed about trading. Essentially, what I was doing as a trader was I was keeping the rhythm of the market. I was tapping in and drumming in to the rhythm of the market and feeling the pulse of the market. And at the same time, when I would make all of this money, literally out of thin air, it was that same kind of aha moment. When I left trading and I went into coaching, I realized I was doing the same thing. I was tapping into the rhythm of my clients, and I was helping them create rhythm through rituals in their day. And at the same time, I got that same aha moment every time I gave them a piece of wisdom that opened up their minds. So what I realized is that when I was a kid and I was drumming and I was doing magic, when I was a Wall Street trader, when I was a therapist, and now when I'm, doing this abundance archetype work, there was a process that was actually moving through me that was independent of those identities, that was consistent there. The drumming, the essence of the drumming, the rhythm, and the essence of opening up one's mind have been there with me since I was a young child, and they'll be there with me to the end of my life. And so identifying what that process is, what is it that's behind everything that's moving you. And typically what we love to do as a child can be a really key indicator in that. And that's helped me help my clients identify in what direction they should be moving in.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And you say 7 years old. Is there a specific reason why you say 7 years old?
I don't think it's has to be 7 years old. I think there's a lot of, Steiner information around 7, and that's kind of the time when the ego is starting to form and this and that. But really, it doesn't have to be specifically 7. I mean, just what did you love to do when you were a young child that you can remember? What did you want to be when you grow up? What's the earliest thing you remember wanting to be when you grew up? I think those kinds of things can be interesting clues into what our life's purpose is for us right now.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, 7 is the time when your brainwave state upregulates into a theta state.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why from the age of 7, we tend to have a better memory because of the brainwave state. So before the age of 7, most of us don't have much memory because the brainwave states were much lower. Well, sorry, it's not theta, actually. It goes into alpha at 7 years old. So 0 to 2, you're in a delta state. So it's like a deep sleep for an adult.
Right.
Then you go into theta, then you go into alpha. And then from 11, 12 onwards, you're into the beta state.
It's really interesting. And, I'm not sure if we have time for it now, but because those memories before 7 are seemingly hard to remember, if you do remember something, ask yourself, what is it about that event? Why am I remembering it? What's the most beautiful event that I remember before the age of 7 or as early as possible? Why am I remembering that? What was it about that symbolically? What was the lesson there that I needed to learn that the universe was dreaming into me? Think about your most uncomfortable or your worst memory as a child. What was it about that made you remember that? And what are you supposed to learn from that? What's your earliest memory of relationships? And looking at that symbolically, and how does that create belief systems around your relationships today? What's your earliest memory of money? And how does that create your belief systems about what money is for you and how you relate to it now? These early memories are very, very interesting. They're like these deep dreamlike states that provide, and your brainwave information is very interesting because it really kind of confirms what I have experienced working with them, that we really are in a dreamlike state at that point. And so it's very close to dreamlike in a way that these things that are happening are almost like symbolisms and, symbols in a dream, and that we can interpret them for deeper meaning into our life purpose. We must ask ourselves, why do I remember this one thing that was kind of random possibly, but we still remember it when we had, thousands or millions of other things that happened to us around that time. So these can be great little clues. You could become like a dream detective, just digging in and exploring. What is it that I remember, and why do I remember that? And what kind of meaning, what kind of purpose does it have in my life now?
It's interesting because I remember, I think I would have been 4 or 5, and my parents bought me a drum kit for Christmas.
Very cool.
And I think it was, in their view, the worst decision of their life. Imagine giving a 4 or 5-year-old a drum kit. I think, I don't think that lasted too long, if I remember right, that drum kit, because obviously the noise, they hadn't have thought about the noise effects of a 4 or 5-year-old constantly playing the drums all the time. Yeah,
well, you're certainly making a big noise now with your podcast.
I did actually play the drums a little bit when I was at school as a teenager.
Yeah, I mean, if that was something you really love to do, you would look at it in the same way I did and say, like, what was the essence of what I loved about it? And, what was it about my parents, symbolically trying to quiet me, and how is that relevant to my life right now in terms of how I'm holding maybe opposing views to the mainstream or to some kind of authority or parental figure, which is, probably true. I mean, your podcast is radical and rebel, right, in the name. So, to me, it makes complete sense that that's what you would remember, because it was sort of like your life's purpose is to speak out and to be radical and to be a rebel to sort of this parental authority of, what we think is the way things should be, but maybe is, farther from the truth.
Yeah, that's a great insight. I like that. That's quite interesting. When 30-year-old Litsa came to see me, she had severe cystic acne, including big red boils and scarring all over her face. She had one of the worst cases of acne I had seen at that point. Litsa had tried everything her doctor and dermatologist had suggested, such as antibiotics, hormone medications, creams and lotions, and her skin continued to get worse. As you can imagine, Litsa's confidence and self-esteem was at an all-time low, and she also suffered from anxiety. Litsa felt unattractive and concerned that her partner would leave her because of the way she looked, and she was worried about being alone for the rest of her life. I made it clear to Litsa that we had to find the underlying cause of her acne. So I ran some tests, and we found out that she had food sensitivities to dairy, soy, and gluten. I coached Litsa how to replace those foods in her diet, and also advised on other foods known to cause acne, as well as other essential lifestyle factors to balance her hormones and detox her body. It was a long road for Litsa, but Litsa has been acne-free for many years now. Her confidence and self-esteem has returned, her anxiety has gone, and she is now happily married with children. If you have acne and you want to get to the root cause of the problem, why not arrange a consultation with me at www.bodycheck.co.uk so you can achieve the same kind of results as Litsa. Now, back to the podcast. So, your key number 2 is working in versus working out.
Right.
So there may be some people in the audience that don't know what that is. So could you explain to them what that is and why that's important?
Yeah, of course. So, step number 2 in the mastery course really gets into deep embodiment. So this is where I explain my life with the 4 doctors, Paul Chek's 4 doctors. And, we said those, and I'm sure your listeners know, but Dr. Diet, Dr. Quiet, Dr. Movement, and Dr. Happiness. And for Paul Chek, if you follow those 4 doctors, they'll be the last 4 doctors you'll ever need. And so, again, that's working on what's the right diet for you, learning about, organic food and how toxicity creates inflammation and how inflammation messes up our mental and emotional state. And then, through that intersectionality, we're not able to perform or live at our best. The same thing with movement practices and sleep and having play in our life. But when it comes to movement, so many, especially the people that are working on Wall Street or in businesses, or really for many of us, are really stressed out, right? I mean, the whole world is pretty freaking stressed out, when it comes from COVID and lockdowns to this work, no pain, no gain mentality. Many of us leave our offices, and I was guilty of this too when I was trying to lose all that weight and working on Wall Street. Many of us will leave the office and go to the gym and work out more, go do an hour on the treadmill or do an hour pushing yourselves or go to a CrossFit class or whatever. But typically that's not actually what we need, because our stress cup is already full. And actually working, and you would know this better than me, but working out in the gym is actually stressful to the system. So we have to have enough reserves to be able to do that. So what I've found actually quite useful is, instead of working out, learn to work in. And working in is essentially just slow movement with breathing. It actually, working out takes your energy away. Working in actually gives you more energy. It gives you more energy than you use to actually do the exercise. So in my course, through each of the 8 steps of mastery, I give you one of the Paul Chek working in exercises that I learned from him, through my practices with him and through his books, but also that I did at my desk throughout the day to maintain a high level of energy and mental clarity and really make sure that I was performing at my best, feeling at my best, and having a sustainable level of energy that didn't require coffee or energy drinks or quick fixes, right? So I'd get up every hour, and maybe it's just doing 10 breathing squats where you're just slowly inhaling and exhaling and squatting down to your ability and just doing that 10 times, but consistently throughout the day. It's just an incredible way to make sure that you have the highest level of energy naturally. And one of the things that works for me in my life, which I'm sure you practice, is checking your morning heart rate. This was something that really revolutionized and made me really become scientific with the 4 doctors. So I was journaling, and still do, but specifically with Paul for probably, I don't even remember, 4 or 5 years. Every day I'd email him a 4-doctor report, which basically looked at my morning heart rate. So for the listeners, the way you do this, the first thing when you wake up in the morning, before you get out of bed, you check your morning heart rate. You do that for a few weeks and you establish an average. Let's say your average is, 60 beats per minute in the morning. Now, when you wake up and you check your heart rate, you have a gauge to know how high or low you are compared to your average. If you're close to your average or under, it's a good indication that you have enough energy to do a working out routine that day, maybe take on a meeting, or you have the capacity to push yourself a little bit more. But if your morning heart rate is, let's just say 4 or 5 or 10 beats above your average, your body is stressed already. And this is not a good day to go do a big workout. This is a day to do work in. This is a day maybe to hit the sauna, go to bed early, maybe back out of an appointment that you can back out of, and really kind of manage yourself in this way. So it's a great way to know what to do in the upcoming day, but also to reflect scientifically on your choices from the previous day. Okay, I woke up. My heart rate is 8 beats over my average. What did I eat last night? What was my relationships like last night? How stressed am I at work? And you start to kind of put all of these puzzle pieces together to see how they all interact. And then you can become more informed about your life. So that's how I gauge whether or not I should be working in or working out on a daily basis. But I also use these working in exercises throughout my day to really keep up that energy and mental clarity.
Yeah, that's great. One of the analogies I often use with clients, ironically, is finance. So,
cool.
If you've got loads of savings in the bank, you can spend more money, right?
Sure.
If you're overdrawn and you've got loans and you've got interest to pay, then you don't really want to go out and start spending a lot of money, right? People tend to understand that analogy, and sadly, most people are the latter, right? Most people are, they've got loads of debt and, they're working hard to try and pay off the debt.
100%.
And if it's the same with your energy levels, if your energy is lacking, the last thing you need is to start reducing your energy levels and the resources that your body's got to run the basic systems.
Totally. I mean, it typically takes money to make money, to invest in something that can actually, produce a return. In the same way, it takes energy to have a return of energy, right? You have to have something in the bank in order to produce more of it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Everyone's heard that saying, haven't they? Money makes money.
Yeah. And, a big thing that I talk about in this course, which we'll get in later, is that everyone's focusing on money, but we're not focusing on our time or our energy. And that's a real big problem. And I think a real big deception of focus. We can spend money, and we can get money back. But once we spend our time or we spend our energy, it's challenging. I mean, especially with time. You spend your time, it's done. You spend your energy. I mean, it's a little bit more kind of esoteric, but in the same way, we need to be focusing on how we're spending our time and our energy as much as focusing on how we're spending our money.
Yeah. Holistic approach, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So your key number 3 is sitting up versus sitting down. Can you explain what those terms mean and why they're important?
Sure. This is part of a larger context of the third step of mastery called poise. And in my model, these are moving up the chakra system. So for me, the first chakra was doing what we love to do. The second chakra, where we create our capacity for creative and sexual energy, is, in the management of the 4 doctors. And now we're in the third chakra, or our solar plexus, right? So here it's all about poise. Yes, it's how we sit, but it's also, what do we stand for? What are our values around? What do we stand up for? What's important for us? What kinds of things are we willing or not willing to do in our job, for that matter? But really, on a more practical level, I teach you all of the steps of ergonomics. One of the big things that I experienced at working on Wall Street was that, everyone's sitting in the same exact desks, in the same exact chairs, with no variation, and they're sitting with poor posture all day long. And this is not only giving them back pain, which is like a huge sap of productivity and absenteeism. It's also giving them, back pain leads to depression and anxiety and mental fog and all, a host of other issues. I mean, back pain is, I think, one of the most expensive costs to employers, dealing with, the expenses of medical bills and insurance bills from back pain alone. So, but it's more than just that. When we set up our desk properly, we can optimize our breathing. And breathing and breath is such a key component to performing at our best, right? If we want to make change, it requires to have more oxygen than our baseline state to make changes that we want to make in our life. Oxygen, I say, is the platform of abundance. It really creates all of our systems working optimally. And I'm sure you could probably go on a lot more about really the science behind oxygen, but it is an essential component. But what's most of us are doing, or we're slouched over, we're not sitting in a proper posture. And then if we don't have enough oxygen, it's like when you see a scary movie and you go, we are in the sense of fight or flight. When we're in fight or flight, we're in survival mode. When we're in survival mode, we're pulling, from what we knew from yesterday, and we're not in a parasympathetic sort of a rest and digest, open-minded state where we could be creative, innovative, and access our intuition. So, I show you that when you were in elementary school, and now when you're sitting at your office, you likely, independent of the fact if you're 4'8" or 6'4", you might be sitting in the exact same size desk with the exact same chair, right? And that's a real problem. So it's all about individuation. How to get your desk, get a standing desk to move up and down. All the different kind of varieties of chairs, from dynamic chairs to other, more standard chairs to Swiss balls. How to stand at your desk, how to move your keyboard and your mouse, and what height to put your monitors. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And even how to do this in a car, or how to do this in a train or in a plane, and how to have biofeedback mechanisms so you know if you're set up appropriately. So this is a really key component here in terms of really understanding that, when it gets back to sitting up versus sitting down, that sitting is a dynamic state, that we're not just plopping down in our chair. We're really doing it mindfully and remembering, what are we here for? Who are we serving? What's our larger dream? And sitting in a dynamic state so that we're working against gravity, or, maybe more working with levity instead of gravity. And we're really, kind of creating that tone and tension in a proper way in our body so that we can perform at our best.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that, really, because, one of the things I try to get across to clients that come to see me, often they're in pain. They're in pain because of their posture, and, they're expecting a corrective exercise program, which they will get. But I always explain to them, how many hours a week are you going to be doing this program? Probably the average is 3 hours, let's say. I say, how many hours are there in a week? And they're like, oh, I don't know. It's 169. If you do your program for 3 hours a week, then you've got poor posture for the other 166 hours. Which do you think is going to win? And they're like, oh. So then I explain what you've just explained about ergonomics and how you hold yourself all the time. Because, it's great to get a corrective exercise program, but you've got to be aware, you've got to be conscious of how you're holding yourself, all the time. Certainly with your waking hours, you need to be conscious of how you're holding yourself.
100%. And so, all of these 8 steps are essentially leading us to a flow state. And, flow states are these states where we can perform and feel our best. We can be, McKinsey reports show that you can be 5 times more productive in flow than out of flow. You can be multitude more creative. It's actually good for your immune system. And what's interesting about what you're saying is one of the key things that they say about that high-performing athletes and high performers in all fields state is a high level of awareness of their body. And so really being aware of how you're standing, how you're holding yourself, what your posture is, that's a really key to creating these kinds of flow states and these high-performance states, whether or not you're on Wall Street or doing a podcast or in a athletic endeavor.
Yeah, it's interesting being a tennis fan as you were speaking and you were talking about flow states and being aware of your body. 2 names came to mind, and that was Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic.
Yeah, well, I think they got that down.
Yeah, absolutely. They should probably run a course on it. Although they don't need the money.
No.
So key number 4 is understanding your whole body intelligence. Can you explain what you mean by that and why that's important?
Yeah. So in step 4, we're into our heart center, right? And this is such a key step of this course. And this step is about coherence. So I'm sure you're familiar with the research by HeartMath. Mm-hmm. HeartMath Institute has, I think, thousands or tens of thousands of publications about the intelligence of our heart. Mm. Our heart has a stronger electromagnetic field than our brain. Our heart has access to what we might call infinite intelligence, or our heart has access to wisdom and discernment and our deepest values, has access to our intuition and looking at problems differently. It enables us to connect with others relationally and much, much more. So, this is about creating a whole body experience. I talk a lot about AI these days, and I'm no AI expert, but if we're going to compete with AI who can do sort of the equivalent of our left brain linear logical computation much better than we can, we have to think about what is unique about us that makes us uniquely human, and how can we compete with something like that. When I was on a persistence hunt about 10 plus years ago, I went down into Namibia and I went hunting with San Bushmen through the desert, running after animals, for upwards of 1 to 2 marathon distances on and off, run, walk, run, walk, run, walk. And what I learned there was that here were people that for thousands of years survived in the desert, realizing what their competitive edge was. And their competitive edge was essentially endurance running versus sprinting. Animals can sprint. Humans can have more endurance because animals need to stop to pant. They can't sweat. They can't carry water, etc. Right? So that was such a glaring, obvious thing of this is what they realized that they needed to hone in on that differentiated them from the rest of their essentially competitors or their environment in order for them to survive. Now, in the same way, we must think what makes us uniquely human. And what I think makes us uniquely human, 1 is the intelligence and wisdom of our heart. 2, the intelligence and wisdom of our bodies. Talk about market testing, right? Billions and billions of years of research in our body, which has way more information than our verbal content of what we're saying. And then the last one is dreaming. And so in this part of the course, I teach you techniques to really access through breath and brainwave states, the intelligence of the wisdom of your heart, left and right brain, whole brain thinking, the wisdom of your gut and gut brain, so that you can use all aspects of yourself to really be at your best and compete in a world where I literally don't think just being able to be good at computing, statistics and linear thinking is actually going to cut it in the future.
That's really interesting. I mean, I guess the other advantage that we've had, and it kind of fits in with what you're saying, but it's just that access to the right brain as well. You know, obviously that's the part that AI, I'm pretty sure, will never be able to do. I can't see an algorithm being able to have an emotion, or maybe I'm wrong, but you know, that innate wisdom that we have, and the integration between right and left brain, I would see as a massive advantage. But the problem is, very few people know how to connect their right and left brains.
You know, this is our birthright, right? I mean, our ancestors were so intimate with this right brain, left brain, whole brain thinking that, you know, we think we're evolved, and in some ways we have, but we literally need to get back to the future, because this whole concept of these 8 steps to mastery, I realized when I was studying Ashtanga yoga and looked at the 8 limbs to Ashtanga yoga, that essentially our ancestors, thousands or tens of thousands of years ago, yogis sitting around on mountaintops and in caves, understood these 8 steps, these systematic 8 steps to perfect oneself. And these things were ubiquitous. It was, people were doing this across the globe in all of the ancient civilizations. And we've really lost touch that our birthright, our capacity, our potential is whole brain thinking, is accessing our heart. It's, being a perfected human. And we've literally lost track of that in pursuit of outside technology, the internet instead of the internet, right? We're looking at, cell phones instead of our cells. And it's all right here inside of us. We just have to literally turn our focus of attention from all of the objects we're staring at to the subject itself, which is us, to realize our full potential. And I'm getting passionate about this because I really worry about the future of the human race if we do not get back to the essential tenets that make us actually human beings. Learning how to take care of our bodies, learning how to move our bodies, learning how to access inner dream, to dreamland. Talk about an incredible algorithm. Talk about an incredible AI. This is not artificial intelligence. This is quantum intelligence. This is divine intelligence. We go to sleep at night and we don't have to do anything but just be willing to engage in the incredible amount of information that comes to us literally while we do nothing but rest. And it could give us so much information, and there's so much going on, even in the signals and signs and gestures and movements of our body, the things that call out to us during the day, the things that catch our attention, all of these things. There's so much rich information, but we're so focused on, social media and all this externalization of all of that technology. And, it really concerns me. And that's one of the main reasons I put this course together, was try to get people back in touch with what it means to be human.
Yeah, I mean, you only have to look back to, ancient Egypt and look at the technology that they had then that we still can't even recreate now. Now, assuming it wasn't aliens and it was humans that did it, they were in some ways way more advanced than we were. But obviously what they didn't have the distractions that we have now. They didn't have the mobile phones and the TVs and the radios and the newspapers and the big factories that people, started working in at the start of the Industrial Revolution. So it's not rocket science to understand that we've lost something in terms of our current level of intelligence. And I did a workshop, a weekend workshop back in 2005 with a guy called Chris Attard. And he actually teaches biogeometry.
Oh, cool.
And during this course, the course was to learn a technique to basically connect your right and left brain. So you're able to use your whole brain to think. And what you're able to do, you're able to access universal consciousness when you can connect right and left brain. And at the end of the workshop, we were told to get into pairs. And I was paired with this lady, and Chris said, right, I want you to write the name and address down of someone you know and hand it to the other person, and they'll do the same for you. So I'm sat there and I'm thinking, I'm not going to be able to do this. Like, what's he expecting me to do here? So what he wanted us to do was to explain the person that they'd written down in as much detail as possible. And I was thinking, I'm not going to be able to do this. This is crazy. So anyway, I got my piece of paper and I saw a name and an address, and I'm just sitting there. My mind's a bit blank and nothing's coming. And then all of a sudden, I just said, "Oh, I can feel there's a guy. There's a big guy. He's tall. He's got dark hair. He's got a black pinstripe suit on, a white shirt, a red tie, and he's got black shiny shoes. He feels hot. He feels cold on the front, but he's warm on the back." And I said, "Is this your son?" And she said, "No, it's my brother. But you just described him when he was young." She said he worked in the City of London. He was a banker. He used to wear a black pinstripe suit with a crisp white shirt and a red tie with black shiny shoes. She said he's got grey hair now, but he used to have dark hair. And she said most people said when they first met him, he was quite cold. But then when you got to know him, he was quite a warm person. And I was just like, wow. Because I just didn't think, or I didn't know that humans were capable of doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. Nature is in their right brain. Birds migrate, trees grow, plants do their thing, animals find watering holes without being in their left brain. They just know. They're one with nature. And we have that capability. But we've been so pushed into our left brain, which splits the whole up into parts, that we've really lost connection with that. And Dr. Karim of biogeometry talks a lot about this, how early man was completely in their right brain. They were one with nature. They were very much sort of like the birds and the animals in some ways. Then we became moving over, to kind of split right and left. And now we're fully in the left brain. And sort of this kind of, I don't know what he calls it, but the man or woman of the future is the one that creeps back to the right, and gets more of a whole brain component. So we have the ability and the wisdom to tap into that. It's just not something that we're taught. It's not something that's cultivated, right? Especially in our culture. I never learned anything about that in school. I never learned the truth of who I really was, why I was here, what body type I had, what foods were best for me, how to make love, how to breathe, how to sleep, how to go to the bathroom, what my stool should look like. All of the things that are so freaking basic, right? Like that we have a soul, or that we are a soul, and that this body is our vehicle and we must learn it like we learn the driver's manual to our car. All of these different things should be taught in kindergarten, throughout elementary school and beyond. And I went through a mainstream education. I went through the University of Virginia, which is one of the top schools in the country, or probably the world. And I didn't learn a thing about that. I left there knowing how to be successful financially, but also I was in a complete and severe crisis. So, we really must get back to educating our children and educating ourselves, really, that we have these capacities. And all it really takes is to do some simple breathing and connection with nature and various relatively simple techniques that I teach in my course to help you access that part of yourself. And it's really interesting you said distractions, because that's a really key segue to number 5.
Are you a personal trainer, exercise professional, or medical professional who wants to upskill and take your knowledge to the next level? And would you like to take a class and be taught personally by me? I'm, of course, talking about Czech Integrative Movement Science Level 1 in Lancashire, England, on the 25th to the 29th of October 2023. I'll be teaching a clinically tested system that makes sense of the entire health and fitness journey, from anatomy to assessment to program design and coaching. You will learn 40 assessments, 60 conditioning exercises, and 27 program design principles. And the Czech framework brings them all together into an incredibly adaptable and effective system. From assessments to exercises to program design and coaching, this is a complete system. Students who master that system can create powerful programs that are tailored specifically to their individual clients' needs, abilities, and motivations. If you're serious about your work and want to take it to the next level, you can enroll on Czech Integrative Movement Science Level 1 with me in Lancashire in the north of England on the 25th to the 29th of October 2023. And you'll need to enroll by the end of June to complete the 3 fantastic prerequisite online classes: program design, scientific core conditioning, and scientific back training that will prepare you greatly for your IMS 1 class. For more details, check out the link in the show notes, but don't delay, places are limited. I hope to see you there.
And number 5 is this concept of turtling or centering, really finding out who you are. And so like what I take people through, an example that I learned from my yogic teacher, Jeffrey Armstrong, is essentially doing a body scan, witnessing your feet, witnessing your knees, your torso, your hands, your face, and so forth. And then looking at sort of your senses, your sense of smell and sight and hearing and taste, and recognizing that there's objects of your senses. There's things you're looking at that are made up of the same elements that your body's made out of, that your senses are made out of. And recognizing that you are the one, who you are is the one seeing through, utilizing those senses as tools and seeing the objects of your senses. And what many of us are really, what's happening to much of us is that we're being pulled by the objects of our senses. We're letting our tongue decide what we eat. Our stomach might say, "Oh, I don't really want that," but our tongue is saying, "Yeah, I want to taste that, little treat or whatever like that." Oh, our sense of sight is seeing a shiny object, and we're being drawn to it. But in the Bhagavad Gita, in the great Hindu text, Arjuna is on a chariot being driven by Krishna, who's, this sort of supreme, representation of the supreme being in this culture. And he's driving a chariot of 5 horses. And this is where this concept of hold your horses comes from, is that we're being constantly running around by all of the distractions of our 5 senses for all of this material, objective stuff that we want. And we literally need to grab the reins and center ourselves in ourselves. And this is the key here in establishing your value system. Paul Chek talks a lot about values. He says your yes has no value until you learn how to say no. What to say no to. What are distractions? Distractions are the absolute death of flow states, right? You're there working in an environment with tons of people around you. There's people coming up. There's phones ringing, and there's text messages going off. There's emails and multiple phones possibly. Information coming across screens and TVs. I mean, this is the environment I worked in when I was on Wall Street, and I recognized that I must center myself in my center, really. And in yoga, they call this turtling, where you bring all of your senses into yourself, and you find yourself as the mayor of the city, the city being your body. I'm in charge, and I'm going to direct my focus how I choose. Because, one of the interesting things about distractions, let's just say we get a text message or someone comes to the door. That we might say that might only take us 1 minute to do, 2 minutes to do. Oh, it's just going to take a minute to answer this email. But what's not important is how long it takes to do the activity, but how long it takes to get back into the flow state after. The flow state can take up to 30 minutes to cultivate. I mean, you might even feel like in this podcast, I know when I do podcasts, it takes about sometimes 20 or 30 minutes to get into this state where you don't even realize you're podcasting anymore. You're just having a conversation, right? But if I went in and answered the door right now and I came back in, I would probably get knocked out of that flow, and it would take the next 20 or 30 minutes to get back into it. So what I like to do is I like to bucket these sort of times of my day when I want to be fully immersed in exactly what I'm doing in that moment. So I might say to my family, look, I'm going to go into my office for 2 hours. I'm going to put a sign in the door. Do not come in here unless it's an emergency. Stop sign. But know that in 2 hours, I'll get all of the work done that I probably would have taken me all day to do. And I have the rest of the day to hang out with you. And then when I'm with my kids, I can be fully immersed in them and giving them the presence and attention in the 1 or 2 hours maybe that I have for them in that moment. which is a much higher impact than if I spent 8 hours with them, let's just say checking my phone or seeing how many likes I had on Instagram or whatever it is, right? So this whole step is really eliminating distractions. In my document, I say business consultant Peter Drucker says, first things first, second things never. We must have like a fierce determination to determine what is a priority, what is the first thing now in the moment, immerse yourself in it, and not believe that, oh yeah, we can multitask. That just means we're doing a lot of things poorly and it's taking a lot more time to do it. So that's really about this step 5 is centering ourselves in who we are, waking up each day, remembering that from the first step out of bed, realizing that we have billions and billions of cells that are dying each day, and that these are these virgin, fresh cells, and we must inform them, hey, I'm in charge here, guys. I'm the boss. This is what we're going to do. Here's our focus. Here's the first thing. Here's the priority. Here's the resonance we're flying on. Let's go get them together. And then really being a fierce defender of your time and eliminating distractions.
Yeah, it's interesting. You were saying, you don't want any distractions to get into the flow state or to stay in the flow state. And I was just thinking of the times when I've been in the flow state, and unfortunately, not frequently enough when I've been playing tennis. But I remember the times that I have been in the flow state, you just don't make a mistake, which is incredible because in tennis, you make loads of mistakes. And I remember I was speaking to my coach at the time, and he was trying to help me find a way to recreate the flow state. And he said, but what was you thinking when you're in the flow state? I said, well, I wasn't thinking anything. And that's the point, right? When you're in the flow state, you're just not thinking. So I completely see where you're coming from with distractions, because as soon as you're distracted, you're thinking about something.
Yeah.
And you're out of that flow state.
And I'm really glad you said that, because this is essentially why I created this course. I realized that there's a lot of talk out there about flow. There's great work. There's Jamie Wheel with Stealing Fire and Stephen Kotler and Mihai Csikszentmihalyi from the 60s and 70s, I think, and even to present day. I think he recently passed, who's talked about as the father of flow. And even William James, psychologist in the late 1800s, was talking about this concept of these flow states. I don't think he called it flow at that time. But I realized I just don't still have an understanding of how we cultivate that. They talk about deep embodiment and a high level of awareness, and, that your flow is following what you're paying attention to, and being in a rich environment. And, time dilates, meaning it either slows down or speeds up, and various qualities of what happens out of the flow state. But I was like, I still don't understand how we get to this until I discovered Ashtanga yoga. And I realized that, wow, what the ancients were doing was a scientific, systematic approach to creating flow. You first, if you want to have flow, you must be passionate about what you're doing. All of the greatest people in the world, just take anyone, Bruce Lee, Paul Chek, Einstein, they love their work. If not, it's not sustainable. You got to love what you do, because then you're really immersed and focus on it. Then you got to take care of your body. You got to eat right. You got to sleep right. You got to train right. Then you got to have the right posture and breathing and be connected to your heart and eliminate distractions, which is where we are now in the 5th chakra. So we're moving up the wheel. And when we get through 6 and 7, we'll finally hit this flow state in 8, where we have, my dream was to help people cultivate those exact experiences that you're talking about on the tennis court, but finding a way to kind of engage with that more regularly, where flow it's not just this thing that happens to us from time to time. It's sort of a reversal where our whole life is now contained within a state of flow.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. So that was key 5.
That was 5, yes.
Learning to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Key 6 is utilize open focus. What does that mean?
Yeah, so this was a really interesting one for me. And when you study flow science, they talk a lot about how in these moments of deep flow, you sort of have this very narrow focus. You have this very narrow and sort of immersed focus, one might say, where you're completely in there. But what I realized by studying the work of Susan and Les Femi of open focus is that there's actually more to focus than just one kind of state of focus, and that actually having attentional flexibility gives us this sense of fluidity that can help us really cultivate these flow states more readily. So what I mean by that is in open focus, they talk about there's narrow focus, maybe looking at an iPhone only, and to the exclusion of everything else, which unfortunately is how much of us are living right now, right? If you imagine living back with the Bushmen, looking out at the horizon and taking in the wind and the sun angle and the footprints and all of the information, that's what would be the opposite, is more of a diffused state where everything is given equal weight. And what they find is not only in these diffuse states are they less stressful for our nervous system, so we're more in a parasympathetic state, but we're actually able to take in more information. They also have a concept of immersed focus, where we're just fully experiencing it, like a very sensual, full-on experience. And then there's an objective focus where we're analyzing what we're doing, right? And so you can pair narrow objective or narrow immersed, or diffused objective and diffused immersed. And so, for me, I can give an example to try to make this more clear. Let's just say I'm at my trading desk and I'm investing. I might want to start out in a very open state, a very relaxed state where I can take in a lot of information. We can call that diffused and objective, where I'm kind of taking a step back. I'm feeling what's happening in my body. I'm noticing my breathing. I'm noticing how my body feels. I'm noticing my posture. I'm noticing my teammates around me on my peripheral. I'm noticing the space between me and the screen. I'm noticing the space behind me, the space of the whole trading floor. I'm noticing all the information coming in the screens and the TVs, all of these things, but I'm kind of not giving any one of them all of my attention and focus, right? It would be like a great martial artist in the same way, about to be in a fight, but not wanting to sort of make a decision too early about what he or she is going to do. They're in this very open state of taking in all of the information and being very balanced. And then maybe they get to the point of attack, or in the trading example, maybe there's an important number that's getting released at a particular time. And you would start to become more narrow objective, where the martial artist is now focusing in more narrowly on the opponent and exactly what he or she might be doing, how they're leaning, how they're moving, how they're breathing, what are they indicating? And then at the point of attack, or in the point of the number dropping in the investment world, there's this period of immersion where you're working basically just on instincts, and you know exactly what to do based on all of the thousands of hours of practice. And then at the end, you don't want to stay in this very sympathetic, heightened, almost emergency running from a line state. You move back to that diffuse and objective and get ready for the next opportunity, kind of lowering your arousal level and being more parasympathetic. So in this state, it's just kind of playing with various exercises to realizing that open focus teaches us that it's actually more important how we attend to something, that how we pay attention to something is more important than what we're actually paying attention to. We could be paying attention to something that's disturbing, but if we're using attentional flexibility in all of our skills, it actually can have less of an impact on us. So how we pay attention is incredibly important to creating flow states and in performance.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And again, as you were speaking, I was trying to think times when I might do that in my life. And again, it's back on the tennis court.
Sure.
And, if you've just hit the ball and the ball's on the other side of the court, you're kind of purveying the whole of the other side of the net, right? As soon as they hit the ball, your focus goes more onto the ball. And the closer the ball gets to you, the more focus you've got just on the ball.
Right.
Right. And as soon as you've hit the ball, your focus widens again. Because now you're seeing, okay, what kind of position is the opponent moving into? What kind of shot does it look like he's going to hit? And where does it look like he's going to hit it? So then you're moving. And again, as soon as he's hit it, your focus is back on the ball. And as the ball gets closer and closer to you, it gets more and more narrow focused.
It's a wonderful example. I mean, even I'm imagining when you're about to serve, you have to be aware of what kind of shot you want to hit, where's the opponent set up, where's the wind, which direction are going in, where's the sun angle, all of these different components that there's so much more information than just being focused only on the tennis ball, right? So, I mean, people like the example of being fly fishing. Imagine you're fly fishing and, going from completely focused only on the rod to taking in the sun and looking at the wind and the way the water's currenting or bubbling and taking in all of the information. There becomes a richness of experience that's actually enjoyable. But in that richness, we can actually get more information, which helps us perform as well.
Yeah, I like that. So key number 7 is alter your state. Again, what does that mean and why is that important?
Yeah, so altered states these days are a big topic with shamanism and medicine journeys and trips to Peru and all there, and then that's a whole other podcast. But if we take the wisdom of why have people in indigenous cultures and ancient cultures for thousands and thousands of years, why have they been altering their states? Well, it turns out that there's a lot of wisdom and access to new types of information that you may not have known through your ordinary mind. There's lots and lots of information on there. I mean, even I'm thinking of Alan Watts says that, one of the key ways to being sane is to spend a few minutes each day being insane, right? So there's something about the balance between our consensus reality and ordinary states of consciousness and occasionally dropping out. Businesses around the world know the benefits of inspiring teams that are stuck on projects to, go do an offsite, go outside, have a meeting in a different room, move your chairs around, play a game, go play ping pong. Listen to music, do something else, like breaking away from a problem and in order to have an inspiration of a creative process. It can be an incredible way to solve problems that we have in the workplace and in our life. So in this section, a lot of this I've cultivated from process work psychology, and I call these microdose meditations or microdose visualizations, ways to have these little microdoses of altered states without having any kind of plant medicines while you're at work. So, there's a couple different exercises, that we could get into, but it's essentially really quick 1-minute things to think about problems and difficult challenges in your life slightly differently by accessing your intuition, by working with objects on your desk, by doing a little sketch on a pad, by going out for a quick walk in nature, various sort of tips like that, ways that we can drop out of an ordinary mind and then access information. And in fact, what was really mind-boggling to me was that much of this course was developed in that way. Obviously, all of the writing and the nuts and bolts of it were done sort of more in an ordinary state of consciousness where I'm sitting in front of my computer and writing it down. But all of the inspiration for the map, right? I mean, I had all this information, 20 years of Wall Street experience, 15 plus years of studying with some of the greatest teachers around the world. And I'm like, how do I put this into something that actually is unique to me and makes sense for people, that's digestible and that actually will make an impact? And many, many of those ideas came in those moments when I was checking out. I went on a sacred hunt with a man named Monsell Denton in Austin, Texas. I organized this group. And it was while I was just sitting under a pecan tree, taking a break from the hunt, that I had a lot of inspirations come in. I work with visualizations that I teach you in the course, where I do these practices before I go to sleep. And then the first thing that comes to me in the morning would be an idea that I would then use to then kind of create more of the big picture idea. So I find that using dreaming and using nature and using some of these microdose meditations are great ways that we can have these huge insights into the big picture that we could then take back into our work and sort of do the moving your feet part of it to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to, altering state to a degree in terms of my best ideas generally happen in rest periods between sets in the gym. Right. So I spend most of my working day in my office here if I'm not, in the gym. But if I'm working out myself, it's about my local gym where I train is about 400 meters away. And just that change of atmosphere, of location, because I'm away from, my stress is gone. When I'm working out, there's no stress. I'm not thinking about, I've got to get this done when I get back. I never think that when I'm working out, I'm working out. For some reason, people at my gym never speak to me when I'm in the gym. I think I'm giving off that vibe. I don't want to talk to anyone. I'm here to train. Right. Because I see lots of other people standing around talking to each other. They spend more time.
Mostly trainers.
Yeah, there was a lot of that as well. But, you see a lot of people and they're being very nice and chatting, and that's all well and good. But I don't go to the gym to socialize.
Yeah.
So when I'm in my rest periods, I'm not really thinking about anything in particular. And I just find ideas come into my head.
That's exactly what I found in my career. And so, I would realize that I had a partner, this is kind of a long topic, but my unique competitive edge was understanding how the weather impacted commodity markets on Wall Street. So my partner, his name was Matt Shera, was a meteorologist. And the two of us studied the weather and how that would impact, various things like energy or agriculture, and much more. But my point is that it wouldn't be until we got time away from the desk. It would be time when he would go on a road trip, or I'd go on vacation, or we get these moments of rest where we'd get these different perspectives to look at our portfolio and say, wait a minute, why are we doing this? We don't have any edge there. Or, I have this idea of where we're going. And so what I realized throughout my career, and now as I'm creating this course, is why do we have to wait for those moments of random rest periods, we can say, where these things come in? Why don't we cultivate those on a daily basis proactively? So I've developed meditations for people to find moments in their day where they can check out and have those rest periods, so that, but in a systematic way, and they can learn to cultivate that and engage in that, so that it's not like just a random eureka moment where you happen to be in the bathtub, but something that we can actually cultivate daily as part of our work or life practice.
Yeah, I can see that would be really useful for a lot of people.
Yeah,
for sure.
Thank you.
So the final key is challenge yourself. So we all have our own ideas of challenging ourselves. What does challenging yourself mean to you?
Yeah, so this is now we've gone through the chakras, right? We're doing what we love. We're fully embodied. We have right posture. We're breathing. We're in our heart space. We've eliminated distractions. We're focusing appropriately. We're altering our state, and now we're there. We're dancing with abundance. We're in it, and so now we're in this highly productive state. But one of the things that much of the flow research says about flow states is that if you want to continuously cultivate them, what's interesting about it is that you have to challenge yourself. What they say is 3 to 4% above your skill level. So that Mihai Csikszentmihalyi says that life satisfaction, once you have a certain amount of your basic survival needs met, let's just say a baseline amount of money, which unfortunately the majority of the world doesn't even have. But if you have your basic survival needs met, if you have a home and food and water and a stable job, let's say, more money doesn't equate to more life satisfaction. Being in the flow does. And one of the keys to being in the flow is to challenging yourself 3% over what you're capable of. And so, what that means, I think, is really remarkable, is that satisfaction doesn't come from the easy win. In fact, like satisfaction can come possibly even more from losing, but it comes from the process of growing and learning and challenging ourselves. So for me, this is a really big part of my investing and my coaching, in that we must become comfortable with the uncomfortable. We are so conditioned to just waking up in our air conditioning house, getting in our air conditioning or heated car, going to our office and being in our parking garage and staying indoors all day. And we don't have anything that's really uncomfortable. We could literally order food 3 meals a day and just get everything on Amazon or whatever, I mean, the problem with that is that when we're then in these high performance situations, particularly let's just say in investing, I can use my body's wisdom to tell me that this is an area that I shouldn't be going in. Let's just say I'm about to do a big trade and I get a feeling of nausea in my stomach. Most people will just say, oh, give me a Tums or give me an Advil. But what I say is, oh, is there some wisdom there? Is that my body's wisdom, which is so much more powerful than my left brain that's consciously thinking about this, telling me that maybe I need to rethink this action? And then I use the techniques that I teach in this course to unfold that and unpack that, to see what's deeper in that signal. But at the same time, I need to be able to discern if I'm also on the edge of, I'm holding back, I'm at a stuck point from really going for it. And so the ways that I encourage people is to become more comfortable with your own edges of yourself in a safe way. That could be cold showers, cold plunges, sauna, meditation, fasting, etc. But it can actually be really simple. It could just be making a movement that you don't normally make, dancing at a wedding, telling somebody how much you really care about them, sharing your love with somebody. It could be simple. It could be writing a handwritten note instead of an email, or going to talk to somebody face to face. Really little things, but practicing this and cultivating it every day, finding little ways to stretch yourself over what you're on the edge of. And the way that you might know that is if you say, oh, I can't do that, or you feel something interrupted, or you start to feel anxious or jittery or something. It's really a moment to say, how could I do this more creatively? How could I do this just a little bit? How could I go over my edge? How could I just tell this person, I really love you, and, I don't say it enough. All of these things that we hold back, how to systematically go over them. And so that's in a nutshell. I also teach in this section how to work with the inner critic. I'll just say that briefly because I think it's really interesting. But in flow states, they often say that the inner critic is silenced. And I do think in these moments of deep immersion, when you're talking about on the tennis court, that there are these moments where that inner critic or that inner sort of person that's jabbing at us, telling us that we're not good enough possibly, or whatever the voice sounds like, does get silenced. But what about the rest of our life? And how do what if the inner critic actually has something there for us, right? I mean, there's all types of inner critics. There can be an abusive inner critic if we've been traumatized ourselves. And that's kind of a critic that we really want to just tell to F off, so to speak. But what if there's a critic saying, hey, you're going to eat something late at night, and there's a voice in your head saying, you really shouldn't do that. We might look at that as a critic, and in some ways it might be, but it might be actually there offering us wisdom. So what I teach people to do that I learned in process psychology is to actually engage in the inner critic. Realize that just like a body symptom may have wisdom for you, just like a dream may have wisdom for you, just like an interruption or a challenging situation or a disturbance in your life actually might be something that you're dreaming up into existence to bring you more into your wholeness and awareness. In the same way, an inner critic might have something there for you that you can either learn from or harness the power of that critic and use it to your advantage. So it's not so much for me about silencing the inner critic. It's more about learning to do Aikido or to dance with the inner critic and to use it to your advantage to actually help you create more flow for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to challenging yourself. What's quite interesting is, and people that know me probably would have heard me say this. And again, I'm hopefully not boring people because I'm going to use another tennis analogy. But whenever I play tennis, I always try and find someone who's just better than me. Because like you said, it doesn't mean any, to beat someone that I'm better than doesn't give me any motivation at all. And plus, if I'm playing against someone who's better than me, what's that going to do to my game?
Totally.
It's going to improve it, right?
Yeah. I don't know if you heard this last podcast that Paul had with, on men. I'm trying to find the name here. It was the last one that came out. He was teaching about, Josh Tyler, Manhood and Process.
Haven't heard it yet.
Yeah. There was something quite interesting in there where they talked about how if you're consistently sort of the alpha, the best at whatever the situation is in the room, you're not really with the right group of people. You shouldn't want to find yourself always as the top dog, because then you're never really challenging yourself and learning. And this universe we live in is a university. The process is the destination. All of the stuff about technology takes away kind of getting your hands dirty, the creative process, the beauty and love that comes from creating something and toiling over something and working hard to something. I mean, all of the richness in life doesn't come from putting something into Chat GPT and getting a term paper written for you. It comes from the research and the development and the going and editing and learning from the professor and sharing what you've learned. That's what life's all about. And we can't do that if we're always the best. And so I think there is a time to be the best in certain situations and to really stand into that and become, the alpha male in certain situations, but also know when that's not the case. And instead of, like they were talking about in the episode, projecting your shadow onto the person by trying to lower the person down to, minimize their kind of abilities, actually realize, wow, this is an opportunity for me to learn and better myself. And isn't that what life's all about anyway?
Yeah, one of the things that or a saying that I often use with my clients is that no one ever achieved anything great sitting in their comfort zone.
That's great.
How true is that?
Yeah.
It's like going to the gym and not pushing yourself, expecting to get stronger.
Totally. It's so true.
Awesome. Jason, this has been great, but what's next for you?
I mean, for me, it's all about this abundance archetype right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is just the beginning of, when I retired from Wall Street, I was around 39 years old. And I thought, wow, this isn't an industry that is sort of like being a professional athlete in some ways. Even Tom Brady finds the end of the road, right? I mean, you can do this until there's some kind of shelf life. Being a Wall Street guy, it's very few Wall Street man or woman for that matter. Many few of them make it into the eldership category without having either, losing their job to somebody younger or being replaced by a computer or just, not having a sustainable, passion for it or whatever it is. There's only a few people that really make it into the upper echelons of that industry for the various reasons that I said. And so what I did is I said, you know what? I want to create a career that I can do for the rest of my life, that I can enjoy doing, that can have an impact. And this abundance archetype is really the beginning for me. And I'm just on the cusp of taking this out to the world. I really would love for all your listeners to check me out, go onto my Instagram and or my website, jasonpickard.org. You'll get all the information there to the 8 keys to greater wealth and well-being, which we touched on today, but there's a lot more depth into that. And then you could sign up for my mailing list where you'll get all the information about the abundance archetype, accessing to group coaching or possibly even private coaching in the future. So yeah, it's all there. And this is where my heart and soul is, and just trying to balance that actually with my own life and my family. And that is my future. That's what I want to be doing for the rest of my life is teaching and focusing on my net impact.
Yeah, it's amazing. Amazing. Yeah. And I just want to say, because obviously I kind of know your story, what a fantastic story it is. And, well done on, going through that pain to get to the right result at the end of the day. Because, you certainly have gone outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing how much pain can actually teach us if we learn from it. I mean, you would not have been able to write your acne guides without the pain of having acne.
Yeah.
I would not be able to talk about transformation without having to transform myself. And so it's incredible when we look back at her life and we see that all of these things that seemed like they were little low moments actually were sort of the yin bleeding into the yang of the new upside of where we are going. You know, you can't have the high without the low. And just really to cap on this is that's what I think true abundance is that despite what's happening in our life, we stay true to who we are. We know why we're here. We know what our purpose is, and we don't let a high or a low knock us off our center. When we can maintain that despite what life throws at us, we are firm in our identity and our authenticity, I think then we can really call ourselves truly abundant.
I think that's an amazing way to end the show. Jason, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your amazing story and, you know, the wisdom that you've gained over, you know, quite a lot of years working with Paul Chek and, you know, doing lots of other study yourself.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
So that's all from Jason and me for this week. But don't forget, you can join me same time, same place next week on the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to give the show a rating and a review, and I'll see you next time.